Welcome to all of you for this study of the Buddha and his Dhamma. As we know that we are studying now the very important part 3 of the book 3 of the Buddha and his Dhamma. And this book, as I was telling you, that Babasaheb Ambedkar has tried to classify the Buddha's teachings into Dhamma, Adhamma and Sadhamma. And today we are going to look at the part which deals with Dhamma, and it is titled as What is Dhamma? And in this section, in this part 3 of the book 3, there are about 6 sections, and all these 6 sections are very important. To maintain purity of life is Dhamma. This is going to be one section which we are going to look at today. The second one is to reach perfection in life is Dhamma. Then third, to live in Nibbana is Dhamma. Fourth, to give up craving is Dhamma. 5, to believe that all compound things are impermanent is Dhamma. 6, to believe that karma is the instrument of moral order is Dhamma. So you see these 6 ways Babasaheb Ambedkar has tried to classify the Dhamma. Each of these 6 sections are very important for us to study. And today we are going to look at the first section, which deals with to maintain purity of life is Dhamma. Now the word here is the purity of life, and we have to understand the word in its totality as to what the Buddha meant by the purity of life. Jivan Sushita, we can say it in Indian languages, Jivan Sushita, how to maintain the purity of life. Now you see the word used by Babasaheb Ambedkar here is maintain, means to cultivate. Okay, it doesn't mean that, we have to become the fanatics over purity. What he says, he's suggesting is this, that we have to maintain the purity of life. And the teaching method of Babasaheb Ambedkar that he applies to study Buddhism or to teach Buddhism is to really make us understand as to what does it mean when he uses a particular phrase. Here in this case, the phrase used is the purity of life. So if anybody asks us what is the Dhamma, there are a number of definitions of the Dhamma. And one of the significant definitions of the Dhamma is to maintain the purity of life. Okay. Very clear, very innovative, and I would say very important for us to understand that the Dhamma, one of the aspects of the Dhamma is to maintain the purity of life. So what does this purity of life entail according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, according to Buddha? So the purity of life entails 3 things, 3 purities. And we as a Buddhist, we have to commit these 3 words to our memory. The most important words, these 3 words are so important. Whenever we're talking about the purity of life, we have to talk about Kaya, Vacha, Mana. These 3 words are so important in Buddhism, Kaya, Vacha, Mana, because the human being is constituted of a body, of the mind, and the Buddha didn't forget the importance of the speech, because speech is very important for us to understand. Okay, so let's look at these 3 words, Kaya, Vacha, and Mana. Body, speech, and mind. Now, when you look at the body, it's very gross. We can feel it. It's so concrete. Whenever we look at the mind, which is very subtle, very abstract, very difficult to, be mindful of. It's very difficult to know. And the speech lies between the mind and the body. It's neither subtle nor very concrete, nor very solid. If we understand these 3 words, Kaya, Vacha, Mana, then we understand the life in its totality as to the human being is made up of Kaya, Vacha, Mana. So what is the purity of body? This is what Babasaheb Ambedkar has put into the Buddha and his Dhamma. What is the purity of body? So the purity of body is nothing but practicing, the 3 things. One is Panati Pata Veramani, Adinna Dana Veramani, and michya ajivika, not to earn our livelihood by what is called the sinful living, the living that hurts other people. So these three aspects of panati pata veramani, adinna dana veramani, not taking what is not given to us. Not taking what is not given to us, very, very clear definition. And michya ajivika, not to earn your livelihood by the sinful wage, is called the purity of body. And what is the purity of speech? So the purity of speech is one abstains from falsehood. And then there are dots. So here Baba Sahib Ambedkar is talking about abstaining from falsehood, abstaining from foolish babble, abstaining from divisive talk, and abstaining from, what is called the, the gossiping. Very interesting. The way Baba Sahib Ambedkar has, the dot are there. But that implies elsewhere, as we have studied, that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has talked about the purity of speech in 4 ways. And we have seen that, those 4 ways. Remarkably, what is important is the purity of mind. And I think this has to be understood very properly, because if the mind is purified, the speech is automatically purified. And the body is automatically purified. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar has gone into the details of what does it mean by the purity of mind. So what is the purity of mind? We have seen elsewhere that Baba Sahib Ambedkar talks about the 5 hindrances. And what are those 5 hindrances? The number 1 hindrance is the sensual desire. The second hindrance is, what is called malevolence. The third is sloth and torpor. The fourth is excitement and flurry. And the fifth is what is called doubt and wavering. So these 5 hindrances, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has said, has taught through the Buddha, or the way he has interpreted Buddha's teachings in terms of the 5 hindrances. And 5 hindrances are so basic to Buddhism that I would recommend all of you to commit these 5 hindrances to your memory from the Pali itself. So the first hindrance that that doesn't let our mind be purified is the hindrance of kama chanda. If you have the pen and paper, I would recommend you to write it down. The first hindrance is kama chanda, sensual pleasure, or personal sensual desire, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has translated into English. The second hindrance is called vapad, which means malevolence, violence, malevolence. The feeling of hatred, the feeling of dejection towards the other people and the world. The third is called, in technical Pali terms, thina middha, and in English, it is called sloth and torpor. It means laziness, the laziness of mind. It means the sleeping states of mind. It means the unawakened states of mind. It means the slumbering mind, the mind that is not awake, the mind that is not alert, the mind that has gone into deep slumber. This is what is meant by the thina middha. And then there is a mind, there is a hindrance called, udacha kukucha. In Pali, it's called udacha kukucha, means the mind that, that is full of excitement and flurry. Udacha kukucha. It's like a monkey mind, never still, always jumping from this object to that object, never ever remaining constant, never ever remaining, firm, but always wavering, going from this place to that place. That mind is called, the hindrance of the mind is called udacha kukucha. And the last hindrance is the doubt, that a mind which doubts. And the greatest doubt is to doubt that there is a possibility of change, that there is a possibility that one can become enlightened just like the Buddha. Isn't it? So you see how Baba Sahib Ambedkar has tried to classify the purity of life into the purity of kaya, purity of vacha, purity of man. Purity of body, purity of mind, purity of speech. And we have seen that the purity of body lies in practicing loving kindness, practicing dana, practicing right livelihood. That is a purification of body. And then this four, michya vacha, in terms of falsehood, in terms of slandering other people, in terms of foolish babble, and in terms of the divisive speech that causes division in the society. And we can of course classify this purity of speech into many things, like what in the today's version we can say, like what they called fake news, the spreading the fake news and alt news and whatnot. So these all comes under the domain of the purity of speech. And the last point about the purity of mind, Babasaheb Ambedkar has very beautifully clarified the ground by saying that we all have to face these 5 hindrances, and if our mind is filled with these 5 hindrances of kamachanda, of vyapad, of thinamidha, of udachakukucha, and finally the hindrance of what is called vichikicha. I'm just going to put one gloss on the word vichikicha. It means that our mind is not ready to inquire chikista. So our mind needs to do a lot of chikista. And for doing the chikista, for doing the analysis, what we need is an alert mind, having some kind of a firmness, having some kind of a constancy to go ahead. And then in this part of the section, Babasaheb Ambedkar has put one gatha, and we have to find the source of this gatha. But this gatha is very, very beautiful in English, and I'm going to read it in English as it is given here. He who is pure in body, speech, and mind, sinless and clean, and blessed with purity, sin washer is the name men give to him. So you see, this gatha has a very deep meaning if we try to understand it. For example, so if somebody is pure by his or her body, mind, and speech, what happens? Anything coming in contact with them automatically is purified. There is a purifying effect of that person whenever people come in contact with him or her. And then what is the name of that person? Sin washer. You see how deep is this? How deep social implication this has, that we always tend to practice the Dhamma and saying that I'm trying to maintain my purity of body, I'm trying to maintain the purity of my speech, I'm trying to maintain the purity of my mind. And as Babasaheb Ambedkar has quoted this verse, talking about these different impurities, and he's saying that finally those people who are pure in body, in speech, and mind, how are they? They are sinless, they are clean, and they are blessed with purity. And what happens? They are called the sin washer, is the name due to him. If you look at the profundity of this state, of this gatha, that the purity that Babasaheb Ambedkar is talking about, he uses the word personal sensual desires. So all of us have personal sensual desires, all of us have a lot of personal issues to deal with. And once we start dealing with that, and the more pure our being becomes, our life becomes. And that is why to maintain the purity of life is the Dhamma. And I think that's very, very profound when we are talking about, this kind of the purity of life as the Dhamma. So he who is pure in body, speech, and mind, sinless and clean, and blessed with purity, sin washer is the name men give to him. So for example, anybody would like to talk about the 3 classification that Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about in terms of the number 1, the purity of body, purity of speech, and purity of mind. And Babasaheb Ambedkar has very elaborately talked about this purities here, and then finally he summarizes this particular subpart with a gatha. And I think that's very significant gatha that we have to commit to our mind. The second subpart of this section is the same, the repetition of purity of body, purity of speech, and purity of mind. And then Baba Ambedkar has gone into, here in a certain one, abstain from taking life, from stealing, from wrong practice in sensual lust. This is called purity of body. What is the purity of speech? Here in a certain one, abstains from falsehood, from idle babble. This is called purity of speech. And what of this sort of the purity of mind? Here in a certain one is not covetous or malevolent of heart and has right view. This is called the purity of mind. These are the three forms of purity. So you see, there is, of course, some kind of editorial things that needs to be done here. And I think that's very important that, we have to understand that a lot of editorial work is needed here. Because we know that Baba Ambedkar has published this, he was intending to publish it in his own lifetime, but this book came out when after Baba Ambedkar left us. This doesn't mean that we don't get the full pith and the substance of what Baba Ambedkar wanted to write, because this is very clear if we refer to any Pali text as to what Baba Ambedkar wanted to mean by this, these dots that are left. Now, going back to the other section that Baba Ambedkar talks about the 5 weaknesses. And I think we have to bear in mind what are these 5 weaknesses and which are a source of weakness to training, because we cannot train ourselves, because Buddhism is all about training. If Buddhism is anything, it's the training of mind, it's the education of mind. And the Buddha has designed a perfect curriculum as to how we can train our minds, as to how we can cultivate our minds, as to how we can educate ourselves. Okay, but if we lack these 5 things, if we are weak in these 5 things, we cannot train ourselves properly. So what are these 5 weaknesses that that we face all the time? This is of course Panchashil. If we are weak in Panchashil, we cannot undertake the further training. So you see, Baba Ambedkar has quoted the 5 precepts here. Taking life means panati pata veramani. Taking what is not given, adinna dana veramani. Adinna dana veramani means taking what is not given. Then kamesu michchachara veramani, lustful and evil practices. Then the 4th is musavada veramani, lying. And the 5 is sura mere majja pamada thana veramani sikha padam samadhiyami, which means indulging in spirituous liquors which cause idleness. Very interesting that we really need to look at all these important things. These are the 5 causes which leads to failure. When these 5 sources of weakness to training are put away, 4 arising of mindfulness should be made to become. Very interesting phrase that we also all need to bear in mind. 4 arising of mindfulness means in the traditional Pali text, they are called the Satipatthana. Chattari Satipatthana. Okay. Then it's like Kayanusati, Vedananusati, Chittanusati, and Dhammanusati. 4 words that we have to bear in mind. One is Kaya, one is Vedana, one is Chitta, and the last one is Dhamma. So mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feeling and sensations. Vedana means not what goes on today in terms of the pain. The painful feeling is just one aspect of Vedana. There is also pleasurable aspect of Vedana, and there is not pleasurable and nor pleasant and not pleasant and not unpleasant Vedana. Na dukkha na sukha Vedana. There is a sukha Vedana, dukkha Vedana, na sukha na dukkha Vedana. Okay, so when we look at this Satipatthana, and Baba Ambedkar has very beautifully put it up, and very gradually he's training us. He's saying that first you have to do away with the failures. You have to do away with the failures of the body, of the mind, and of the speech. And we have seen that to maintain the purity of life is the mind. Baba Ambedkar has gone on classifying it. And then now in this section, he's talking about the 5 weaknesses that are there, which are not ready to let us train ourselves. because Buddhism is nothing but the training. It's education. It's a continuous education of mind. It's a continuous education of speech. It's a continuous education of body as to how we can maintain the purity of life in terms of the purity of mind, purity of speech, and purity of body. And here in this third subpart, Baba Ambedkar is talking about the 5 failures. And those 5 failures are nothing but the 5 precepts. And unless we have some practice of 5 precepts, it is very difficult, as Baba Ambedkar has said, to put into practice the 4 arising of mindfulness. The 4 arising of mindfulness is nothing but the 4 Satipatthana. It's a Satipatthana. So first, Shila, Sati. You see the sequence, Shila and Sati. And Sati is all about the Sati of Kaya, Kayanusati, the Sati of Vedana, Vedananusati, and the third, the Sati of Chitta, the mindfulness of the mind itself, and the mindfulness of the Dhamma, the reality, the nature of the world, the nature of the mind, the nature of everything that is there. Okay, so this is the 4 sort of Satipatthana that Baba Ambedkar has taught us very early on. And then as it goes along, he says that, here a monk abide contemplating the body as body. So, one becomes mindful of body as body, becomes mindful of hand, as brain, as eyes as eyes, and so on and so forth. But how does he or she becomes aware of, how does he or she contemplates the body as body? By, strenuous mind, mindfulness, self-possessed, having overcome both hankering and discontent common in the world. So we have to, leave away hankering after the sensual objects, which is called the raga in terms of Buddhist parlance, raga. And then we have to deal away with dosha, hatred or discontent. Okay, so running after something, the Buddha says that we cannot run after something like, with a neurotic mind, or we cannot be so much discontent with everything around us, which leads to, finally leads to hatred and violence. Discontent means small irritations finally leads to anger and violence. He abides contemplating the feelings as feelings. Vedana passati. In traditional formula, they are called Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, and Dhammanupassana. He abides contemplating the mind as mind. He abides contemplating ideas as ideas, strenuous, mindful, and self-possessed, having overcome both the hankering and discontent common in the world. When these 5 sources of weakness to training are put away, these 4 arising of mindfulness should be made to become. So we see, what Baba Ambedkar is trying to teach us here is a very gradual path. He's saying that you cannot have the practice of sati, you cannot establish sati. Satipatthana means establishing sati. You cannot establish sati without having some success in practicing 5 precepts. If we failed to practice 5 precepts in a larger way, we cannot practice the sati. So you cannot just say that, I practice my, meditation and that's it, I am a Buddhist. It's not like that. There is a sequence there. We have to maintain the purity of life. And Baba Ambedkar has defined purity of life in a very beautiful way, as we have seen in the previous subsections. And we have seen that the mind which is purified, the Buddha has called him sin washer. So anybody who comes in contact with that kind of a person, their sins are less and weakened, because they see something very higher than themselves. They see something very beautiful than themselves. They see something that they would like to aspire in their lives. And I think this part of Sila and Sati ties up very beautifully in this subsection that Baba Ambedkar has given us. And in the 4th section, I think it's a culmination of this perfect teaching of purity of life. So Baba Ambedkar talks about the 3 failures. So failures in terms of Shila, failures in morals, failure in mind, and the failure in view. Very, very beautiful classification. Now, what is it to fail in morals? A certain one takes life, steals, is a wrongdoer in sensual desires, a liar, a slanderer, of bitter speech, an idle babbler. This is called failure in morals. Okay, so one fails in moral, one fails in Shila, if one is taking what is not given to him, if one is taking life, if one is doing, completely indulge into the sensuality, one is a liar, a slanderer, of bitter speech, and idle babbler. These are called the failure in morals. And what sort of failure in mind? A certain one is covetous, greedy, malevolent, full of hatred of heart. This is called the failure in mind. So raga and dvesha, those persons who are filled with raga and dosha, rago, doso, raga and doso, their mind, it's called a failure in mind. And what is the failure in view? Ditti. Failure in ditti, because not able to see the way it is. So herein a certain one holds the depraved, the perverse view that there is no virtue in almsgiving. There is no virtue in dana, in sacrifice, in offerings, that there is no fruit, no result of good and evil deeds, that this world is not, that there is no world beyond, that there is no mother, no father, no beings of spontaneous birth, that in the world are no recluses and Brahmins who have won the summit, who have won perfection, who of themselves by their own intuitional powers have realized the world beyond and can proclaim it. This monks is called a failure in view. That means the failure in view is not accepting the fact that there is enlightenment in the world. There can be enlightened beings in the world, that the karmas bear the fruits, that there are the results of a karma. There, if we do good, good will happen to us. If we do bad, the bad will happen to us. You see, this is very, very interesting sort of a paragraph. So what Baba Ambedkar is talking about, is the three failures. Sila, failure in sila, failure in what is called the mind, the failure in view, wrong ditti, michha ditti. And if you look at Satipatthana, it's also called Chitta Vivek. How to maintain the Vivek of the Chitta. Traditionally, the practices of mind, the meditation in Buddhism are also called the Chitta Bhavana. Because we have to cultivate the mind. That's what the meditation is called in Buddhism. Chitta Bhavana, the cultivation of mind. So if we want to stop away ourselves from the failure in rago and dosa, rag and dvesh, we have to cultivate the mind. We have to cultivate our mind. If we want to avoid failure in Shila, we have to practice the 5 precepts. And if we want to reform our view, then we have to cultivate pradnya. So what happens? Monks, it is due to failure in morals, failure in mind and view that beings, when body breaks up after death, are reborn in the West, the way of woe, in the downfall, in purgatory. Such are the 3 failures. The typical phrase in the Pali is Kayasya Beda Paramarna. After the disintegration of the body, one goes to the bad state. That's what is implied here. But even if we don't bother about this life after death, even if we can think through these things in terms of how well lived that life will be if we practice the purity of body, mind, and speech. And monks, there are these 3 successes. So Buddha also talks about the 3 successes. What 3? Success in Shila, success in Chitta, success in Ditti. Okay. So now what sort is the success in morals? A certain one abstains from taking life and the rest, from bitter speech and idle babbling. That's repeated previously. This is called success in morals. And what sort is the success in mind? Herein, a certain one is not covetous, greedy, or malevolent, violent of heart. This is called success in mind. And of what sort is success in view? Herein, a certain one has right view. He holds with certainty that there is virtue in almsgiving, that there is virtue in giving, when virtue in sacrifice, in offering, that there is fruit and the result of good and evil deeds, that this world exists. The Buddha has not denied the existence of this world. Sometimes some religious practices ask you to deny the existence of the world. The Buddha never denied the existence of this world by saying that this world is, that this world exists, that there is a world beyond, also that there is a world beyond this, which is called the Lokuttar Chitta, the Chitta of the Buddha, the Chitta of the Arhat, that mother, father, and beings of spontaneous birth do exist, and that in the world there are recluses and Brahmins who have realized the world beyond and can proclaim it. This, monks, is called success in view. It is owing to success in these three things that beings, when body breaks up after death, are reborn in the happy lot, in the heaven world. Such monks are the three successes. So this is the end of this section, and I'm going to just provide you the summary of it in another few minutes, and then we will open up today's class for further discussion. So as I told you, that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has classified the Buddha's teaching into three, and this is the traditional classification: the Dhamma, Adhamma, and Sadhamma. Okay, in the Dhamma section, what is the Dhamma? Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given 6 sections, which are very interesting. And these sections I have read about what is Dhamma. So the first, what is Dhamma, is to maintain purity of life is the Dhamma. And then Baba Sahib Ambedkar goes on explaining what is it to maintain the purity of life. So what is it to be maintain the purity of life? Is to maintain the purity of body, to maintain the purity of speech, and to maintain the purity of mind. And then Baba Sahib Ambedkar goes into the details of what does it mean by maintaining the purity of speech. We all know lying, slandering, idle babble, and divisive thoughts, divisive speech. These are all parts of what we can call the purity of speech. And then Baba Sahib Ambedkar goes into what is the purity of mind. And purity of mind, he talked about very interesting things, like he talks about the 5 hindrances. And as a Buddhist, we have to study these 5 hindrances, because these 5 hindrances are the obstacles to the purification of mind. And what are those 5 hindrances? That I requested all of you to note them down in the Pali language. The number 1 hindrance is kama chanda, that our mind is so much indulged into the sensuality, so much indulged into sensual pleasures, hankering after this object and that object of pleasure. It is called kama chanda. And the second hindrance is the vyapad. Okay. And the third hindrance is thina middha. And the fourth hindrance is udacha kukucha. And the fifth is vichikicha. And as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has translated them, the first hindrance is called the hindrance of personal sensual desires, sensuality. The second is the hindrance of malevolence. The third is the hindrance of sloth and torpor. And the fourth is excitement and flurry. And the fifth is what is called the doubting, personal doubt and wavering. So once we start working on our hindrances, we are trying to purify our mind. When we are trying to do away with false speech, we are trying to do away with slandering, we are trying to do with foolish babble, we are purifying our speech. And once we are trying to keep ourselves from not taking life, not taking what is not given to us, and when we resort to right livelihood, that is called the purity of body. And when this purity is cultivated, it's a cultivation of purity of life. And when this purity in body, speech, and mind is cultivated, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given the Gatha here from Pali, he who is pure in body, speech, and mind, sinless and clean and blessed with purity, sin washer is the name men give to him. So, with such a person, if there is such a person with a pure mind, with a pure life, anybody coming in contact with them, they get purified to some extent. That's what it meant here. And then Baba Sahib Ambedkar goes on talking about the 5 weaknesses of Panchashil. If we don't practice Panchashil, then we encounter the failure. And without practicing the Panchashil, we cannot establish the Sati, the mindfulness. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar has talked about the 4 mindfulness: the mindfulness of body. And I told you in traditional Pali, it is called Kaya Nupassana, the mindfulness of feelings or sensation. In traditional Pali, it is called Vedananupassana. And then the mindfulness of mind itself, it's called Chittanupassana. And finally, the mindfulness of reality, truth, whatever there is that we experience it, and their qualities, it's called Dhammanupassana. So Baba Ambedkar says that without practicing Sila, one cannot practice Sati. And then when Baba Ambedkar goes further into his discussion on how we can maintain the purity of life, he talks about the three failures. The one failure is failure in Sila, another failure is failure in Sati, and the third failure is failure in the Ditti, the vision, wrong view. And then Baba Ambedkar has gone into the length and breadth of discussing this. I find these things very important, that we have we cannot deny the reality of the world, that this world exists. And the phrase that Baba Ambedkar has offered here is that this world is, and also that there is a world beyond. And in Pali terminology, it's called Lokiya Chitta and Lokuttar Chitta. So the Lokuttar Chitta, the Lokuttar reality is all about the realities that the Buddha and the Arhat they experience, the great awakened being they experience, the world beyond. They are not confined to the limitations of this world, but they do not also deny the world that surrounds them. And also Baba Ambedkar talks about that we have to believe, we have to accept the reality that there can be a few people, some people who are awakened ones, who has realized the world beyond. And this is called the success in view. I think that's wonderfully exposed exposition that Baba Ambedkar has given in terms of the how to maintain the purity of life. And with this, we would open our class for the further discussions.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Jai Bhim, Samiksha.
Yes, sir. Sir, these 5 hindrances which you told, these are.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Am I audible, sir, now?
Yeah.
So, sir, these 5 hindrances are same like the asavas, the taints of mind, which is something.
You see, all these things, these are all lists that the Buddha has given. So when we are talking about ashravas, something that drives us out, that deranges our minds, our mind is called the ashravas. So basically, when we are approaching the Buddhism in terms of one list, it connects with all other lists that the Buddha has offered, isn't it? So if we want to find the linkages between ashravas and neurons, we can find out. But to my mind, I think the neurons offer a perfect sort of a framework in terms of where we need to work, what sort of things we need to cultivate. So for example, when we talk about the kama chanda, we know the sensuality. So it's not kama chanda in terms of just sexual feelings, but in terms of, any objects, the object of sound, the object of sight, the object of taste, the object of smell, the object of touch, even some of the ideas that are so enticing. Some of the philosophies are so enticing that we get lost in them. So I think what Baba Ambedkar has brought in particular here from the teachings of the Buddha is a very clear framework for us to practice the purity of mind. And you can always go back to Kama Shrav and Bhava Shrav and whatever Shrav there are. But I think this is very clear exposition. So if we look at 5 hindrances in terms of Kama Chanda, we all know what is Kama Chanda. We all know that we get distracted by the sounds, we get distracted by the smells, we get distracted by certain fanciful ideas, certain fanciful ideologies. And Buddha is saying that, we have to, guard our mind from the flow, from the flow, the flood, which is ashrava, flood of sensuality, one. Number two, look at the way the, Buddha has talked about, udacha kukucha, the flickering mind, the mind that jumps from this object to that object. And for example, a sleeping, lazy mind, udacha kukucha. Then vyapad, our mind is always full of irritation. We are irritated all the time of this thing or that thing, of small thing and big things. And this irritation ultimately leads us to violence. And the last but not the least is the mind, the state of mind of doubt. We doubt everything. We doubt that, the Buddha doesn't exist. We doubt that the enlightenment is not possible. We doubt that the Dhamma doesn't work, isn't it? So we can have different, frameworks, but let's stick to certain frameworks which are very clear in terms of letting us to practice certain things, which gives a clarity, which gives a framework to practice.
Thank you, sir.
Let's not involve into the words and the terminologies. Let's find a clear way that works for us.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Jai Bhim, Umiji.
Sir, I'm very glad and thankful that so wonderfully you have explained each and every verse over here. Only thing is, earlier also I have shared my views with our fellows. How to practice means it's there. Listening and reading gives us very good feeling. But when it comes to the practice, but we are not finding the way. Means how to proceed. Kindly guide, please.
See, brother, these are called trainings. As I was telling you that Buddhism is all about training the mind. So nothing is going to happen, in a spur of second. Nothing. There is no magical wand. This thing that you say abracadabra and everything will be all right. It's not going to happen. We have to train. We have to practice. We are going to fail. So 5 precepts or Panchashila are not easy to practice. They are very difficult to practice.
Yes, true.
Isn't it? But to have that standard, have that framework for life, to maintain the purity of life. So when one fails, one knows that they are failed. So for example, if we harm somebody, even to know that we have harmed somebody is a part to development.
It means in every second we have to be mindful and thoughtful.
That is true. But what happens once your mind is purified of these 5 hindrances, these 5 precepts become your natural behavior.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So if you practice the precept of mind, you practice precepts of body and speech.
Everything starts with mind.
Everything starts with mind. So if we practice, for example, dana, if our mind is full of dana, giving, then that mind will never ever try to take what is not given.
Wow.
Because your mind is now conditioned to only give. So how can that mind, which is only conditioned to give, can steal? It cannot.
Yeah.
So for example, if your mind is full of love for everybody, then how can that mind kill anybody or hurt anybody?
Perfect.
Okay. So if your mind is, hankering after truth, how can that mind accept the falsehood?
But it hurts. It hurts a lot. Means, when we start doing this thing, means then we have to face so much hurdles in this world.
You will fail that, because that is the way the world is, no?
Yeah.
How many people in the world have the standard of 5 precepts?
No,
A
that,
lot of people have no standard to live, na?
yes.
Isn't it? So we don't have to get discouraged because there are these standards with us. We will fail many times, but we should know that we have failed.
Yeah, we have to enjoy our failures also.
Yes.
But Samiksha has misguided me yesterday that reading and listening a Dhamma, that also will help in getting all this teaching in our life.
That's true. That's true. Actually, it begins with the study of Dhamma. The first is called what is called Shrutamai Pradnya, because that time there were no books at the time of the Buddha. So the intelligent man was called Bahusuta, the man who has listened so much.
Yes.
Okay, so the practice of Dhamma starts with studying, knowing more and more of the path of the Buddha's teachings. Then Chintanmay Pradna, then you practice it, and then you become that very reality itself.
Yeah. Right way. It's a right way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Anybody else? Shashank.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Jai Bhim, Shashank.
Yes, sir. It's a beautiful, I can say, the purification of Dhamma, the purification of life. In today's chapter, you have explained. So in that, the Pali, hindrances you mentioned, like Kamachanda, Vyapad, Thinamidha, Uducha Kukucha, Vichikitsa. So the fourth hindrance, Uducha Kukucha, that is, the monkey jumping from one branch of a tree and going to another branch of a tree, and he's not focused on anywhere. I think in today's life, I can say we are really jumping from one topic and another topic, or for example, in today's digital world, rather, when we post something in any in our social media, we always try to get, whether that person will like that photo, whether that person will comment on our post, whether that person will give any reaction to that. So that kind of a monkey mind is always there. And whenever we get some like, we get excited, we get flurry, excitement and flurry, the combination of that. And our mind is not productive. Our mind is not focused on one thing. And his mind is like, looking everywhere, when I get the last scene, when I get a comment, when I get appreciation. So that kind of a uducha kukucha mind is affected by everyone in today's world, in today's digital world. We are feeling distracted all the time. So yeah, and this purity of mind will definitely help us to focus on one aspect, and that is purity of mind. I can say the reflective mind. Focus on one topic, going into deeper what we want and what we achieve by getting by purifying our mind. So that is a beautiful aspect of the uducha kukucha. And also one thing about Thinamidha. Thinamidha is nothing but laziness, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So laziness definitely can be overcome by training of the body and the mind in parallel. So we cannot just train the mind and neglect the body. We have to train the body and mind both parallel together. So that kind way we can get rid of all the laziness, because we definitely get trapped because of lots of stress in our life. We have to work more than 8 hours, sometimes 8 and 9 hours, sometimes, and lots of stress over personal issues. So we get stressed out and we get lazy after that. So I think from that perspective, every day we have to train our body, maybe for half an hour, go for a walk, do some rigorous exercise, and as well as go and study the Buddha's Dhamma, the way you arrange this once in a week class on Saturday. Apart from that, we can study at least one page of Buddha's Dhamma to have a reflection. So that training of the mind and the body will go parallel, and that will never happen. That will will go again and again. Every day we have to train. We cannot just stop our training just one day because it is Sunday. Oh, just take a rest or something. We have to train every day, 24/7. So that purity of body, purity of mind, and purity of speech. This beautifully explained, Mangesh sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Mahasen ji?
Yes, what I wanted to tell is, when once we decide in a right direction and act in a right direction, the hindrances automatically get evaporated. So here the Buddha's Gata, Sabha Papa Sakarana Kusalasya Upasampada Sachida Paryoda Panangetang Buddhana Sasana. This comes to fore. We should analyze what is right and what is wrong. When it is right, go ahead. Our mind should be able to analyze what is wrong and what is correct.
Good.
And when we are moving in the right direction, the hindrances which we have discussed gets automatically evaporated. That is the fun. That is very interesting, actually.
Yes.
Interesting. That was what I wanted to mention. Yes. The other gentleman was telling how to practice. We have to think. See, we have to be watchful for our every action. If it is right, okay, go ahead. If you think it is not okay, don't act. Likewise, we can advance in our Dhamma practice. That's what I want to share.
Good.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody? Yes, madam.
Covetousness and malevolence that is greed and hatred, the failure of mind, and to remove them, the practice of eightfold path is important,
Yes, yes, yes.
right view, and then samyak vyayam, and this, samma sati and samma samadhi. Because of this samma samadhi, we can get rid of the 5 hindrances and purify our mind. That is success in mind.
True, 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 true. True.
So one more beautiful thing Baba Sahib has put that you have beautifully explained regarding the sin washer, the Gatha, Buddha's Dhamma, Baba Sahib has put it. So this sin washer, I feel, can be a collective sin washer, by gathering in the, in viharas and just collectively practice those sin washer. We help each other to wash their sin, to help each other to train their mind, to train their body, to train their speech. So that collective sin washer definitely will be really helpful to train in a rigorous way. So that definitely will helpful. And also regarding the Srutamaya Pradnya, definitely study and the understanding and the knowledge of the Dhamma and also the Panchashil definitely help. I really feel that study is very important, but I can say apart from the study, we have to always link with the study with the actual practice, actual experience. We cannot just take the apple in our hand and just describe how the apple is so beautiful, how it is color, the red color, but we are eating that apple, right? We have to eat that apple to gain the experience of the apple.
True.
That is like Bhavanamaya Pradnya. So Srutamaya Pradnya and Bhavanamaya Pradnya should go hand in hand, and then we can actually train our mind and cultivate our mind in a positive way. And definitely in that way, we can actually washing our sin in reality and practically by actually eating that apple, eating the apple of Dhamma, we can say.
We have another 5 minutes to go. And before that, if there is anybody who would like to comment or say something or offer any of their experiences, you're welcome to do.
Sir,
do you-
can you
Yeah.
guide a few books means regarding to understand all these philosophies much more in a vast way, if possible?
Definitely. Umesh bhai, what I think now, the time has come for most of us to, read Pali.
Okay.
And, there are a lot of technical terms. If we can, understand that technical terms, we don't have to read a lot because, it's all about understanding those terms and understanding the connections between them. So you can start reading basic Pali texts, Pali Sutra, the Buddha Puja Part. Unfortunately, it is just in Marathi. That needs to be, that has been translated in other languages also. But Baba Sahib Ambedkar has translated some gathas in Marathi and they are very beautifully translated. So apart from Buddha and his Dhamma, one can start reading, going back to the Tripitakas or certain suttas. And I know one book which I will send a link to in the group, where the author has tried to translate 16 Pali text into a very gradual reading. And there are a lot of books now available on Buddhism in all over the places. Free resources are so many. My contention will be to master the Buddha and his Dhamma as much we can, and then expand the study to other sources. And therefore, I think even if you can make it a practice to read Buddha and his Dhamma every day, to study, to talk, to discuss, to teach, I think that would be a very good start for studying the Dhamma.
Scene motion, can it be said like Nibbana?
What
Nibbana stage is like scene motion. Baba Sahib is saying scene motion.
Word scene washer is a very beautiful word actually that Baba Ambedkar has used, and I would like some of you to go into finding this actual Pali Gatha. isn't it? What does the scene washer in Pali called? It will be to a very good exercise. And in the Buddha and Dhamma, Baba Ambedkar also described Sangha, the Sangha as the bathing house. So where people go to take bath and remove their dirt, isn't it? Because see, we are not pure like the Buddha. We are not pure like Arhanta. So when we interact, when we talk, a lot of impurities will come out. A lot of dust will come out, isn't it? So the ultimate sin washer is the Buddha. So ultimate sin washer is the Nibbana.
Nibbana, I think.
Ultimate sin washer is the Noble Eightfold Path, because Noble Eightfold Path and Nibbana cannot be differentiated.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So the mechanism of sin washing is the practice of Noble Eightfold Path.
Yeah. Because Nibbana, we say that control of passions, removal of passions.
Yes.
So it seems like this.
Yes, there are many symbols like that.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
All right, then, if there is nothing else going on, then should we end for today and meet next Saturday?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jai Bhim.